Well, hi there everyone and welcome. I'm so glad you stopped by my channel. Today's recipe is fantastic. I think y'all are really gonna like this one. This is for another meal in a jar. It's for simple Irish stew and a bonus recipe, Irish soda bread. I think part of the beauty of Irish stew is just the simplicity of the ingredients. So we've got stew meat, potatoes, carrots, a few vegetables to help support that flavor. And then the broth is fantastic. I've got tomato powder, beef bouillon, some Espanol sauce, and simple herbs, rosemary and thyme. Let's do this. I'm starting with just a 1.5 pint jar because I only wanted 2 or 3 servings. We got 3 servings out of this, but I ran out of room in my jar. So I figured out that if you want to include the mushrooms, use a quart jar. Now, mushrooms are not traditional in an Irish stew, but I like them. I like to add them, but they're optional. Start with some beef dices and add some carrots to that. You only need about 3 tablespoons. Our carrots are very sweet and you don't want them to take over the dish. There's a good amount of freeze-dried potatoes in there and just a few onions and some celery to really complement those flavors. Our seasonings are very simple. I've got rosemary and thyme in there. I actually ran out of my dried rosemary. That's fresh rosemary from my garden, but y'all use the dried for your jar. Now, these mushrooms, sadly, they didn't make it into the jar, but I will add them later on in the video. I needed to have room for the sauce powders. I got a snack baggie, and into that I put the tomato powder, some flour, and some beef bouillon, as well as some Espanol sauce. Now, if you don't have our Espanol sauce, you can leave that out. Or better yet, I have a copycat recipe for that on my channel, and I'll link to that below. So seal up that bag and put that in the top of your jar. I'll include a couple of bay leaves. Here's the oxygen absorber. But how about that? That's a really nice jar, isn't it? Beautiful layers. So this is what you would store on your pantry shelf. I just love having meals like this waiting for me in my pantry. It is so convenient for our busy lives. Also, I love cooking with freeze-dried food because once you open a can of those potatoes or a can of that beef or the carrots, you have an entire year to use up the contents of the can. So it has really helped me eliminate food waste in our home. And when you would like to prepare this, just get out a large soup pot. Go ahead and remove those bay leaves. We'll add those back in a minute, and set that baggie to the side. Empty the contents of your jar into your soup pot. There go those mushrooms. And then just start with a 1.5 cups of water. Now you might be thinking, Kareth, that's not enough water to refresh these ingredients and get the beef tender. And you'd be right, that is not enough water. All I'm doing here really is I'm hydrating those vegetables just a little bit so that I can saute them without burning them. I'm trying to build flavors here, so I figured out that I can get really great flavor with these ingredients if I saute them first. So that 1.5 cups of water, you'll bring it to a boil, and it doesn't need to cook but for maybe 4 or 5 minutes, and that water will evaporate off and you'll pretty much have a dry pan at this point. But those veggies will have absorbed enough water to where you can saute them and they won't burn on you. I'm going to use some avocado oil here. I started with 2 tablespoons and I ended up adding a third later on. I like avocado oil because number 1, it's neutral flavored, and number 2, it's got a high smoke point. To that, you're going to add that baggie of powders. And what we're doing here is we're sauteing or toasting that flour and that tomato powder. Raw flour does not taste good. You don't want to have raw flour in your sauce. But if you toast that flour in the oil, you're going to have wonderfully flavored sauce. So after you kind of get that tomato powder and that flour absorbed in that oil, you can just kind of combine everything and it will start to saute. Now you're going to develop some fond on the bottom of your pot, and that's great. That's wonderful. Don't worry about it. It will come up whenever we add some liquid to the pot. That is going to give your dish fantastic flavor. And you don't need to saute that very long, maybe 5 or 6 minutes, something like that. You'll be smelling some wonderful aromas in your kitchen, and you can go ahead and add about 3 cups of water. Now, if you would like to substitute a cup of stout or Guinness in here, you can do that. Be sure to scrape up the fond off of the bottom of the pot. You want all those bits in your sauce, right? It will give your broth great flavor. So go ahead and cover that and bring it up to a boil. Don't forget your bay leaves like I did. Cover that and turn down your heat and simmer it for about 15 minutes. After that time, you can remove the lid and continue to simmer for an additional 15 minutes. I just came along and gave it a stir every probably 5 minutes or so. It's not fussy, it doesn't really stick to the bottom, and after a while you'll notice that the sauce color has deepened and it gets really nice and glossy. Go ahead and give it a taste. If you'll remember, I didn't add any salt and pepper at the beginning, mainly because that beef bouillon has some salt in it, but I think it does need some salt, so just do that to taste. I probably added about 1/4 teaspoon. Go ahead and fish out your bay leaves and it's ready to serve up. Just look at that wonderful stew. You'll be amazed at how tender the beef dices get when you cook them long enough. Those carrots are perfect, the potatoes are great. It's just a wonderful stew. And our favorite thing to serve this with is a good Irish soda bread with copious amounts of Kerrygold butter on it. That's just the way you do it. So isn't that beautiful? Now, because Thrive Life beef dices are kind of small and the potatoes are small and the carrots are small, you don't get those good big chunks that you usually see in an Irish stew, but you are going to get that same wonderful flavor. And I thought, I'm showing you this beautiful stew that we only ever eat with our Irish soda bread. And I thought, it's kind of mean to show you the stew and the bread and not give you the recipe. So I decided, all right, I'll film this and show everybody how I make my soda bread. Now I've made both gluten-free and regular all-purpose soda bread. Both of them always work. This is not a difficult bread. There's no kneading, there's no proofing. The soda is what makes it rise. So let me show you. This is my mom's recipe, and I'm going to go ahead and put it in a jar to show you that you could store this next to your stew. You could store your soda bread in the pantry next to your stew. So anytime you want to make the stew, you could just get out a jar of the soda bread as well and have them together. Very simple ingredients. This is exactly my mom's recipe. She used both soda and baking powder in her recipe, and that acts as the leavening agent. She also put a little bit of egg in hers, and I think it helps with the structure and with the rise a little bit. So that is what you could store on your pantry shelf. And let me show you how to put it together. It's very easy. Dump your ingredients into a bowl. That's a large bowl. That was my Mama Helen's bowl, my favorite bowl. Stir your ingredients a little bit to combine them. And if you're using a gluten-free flour like I am here, it's 1 cup of water. If you're using all-purpose regular flour, it's 3/4 of a cup of water. That's the only difference in the recipe. The rest of it's exactly the same. And that's all there is to it. You stir it together and you're going to let it sit while you preheat your oven. Gluten-free flour needs to hydrate a little bit. So when your oven is ready, flour your surface and turn your dough to get all sides of it floured, just so you can handle it really. And all you have to do is shape it into a kind of a circle. That's it. There's no kneading. I just plopped it on some parchment paper in the shape of a circle, that's all. You have to cut into it, you have to cut across, and that really helps the bread cook evenly on the inside. And then you cut the fairy holes. And that's going to ensure an even bake. Put the parchment paper into the Dutch oven or just any container that has a lid. And it needs to bake at 425 for about 25 minutes with the lid on, and then about 15 minutes with the lid off. And that's what you have at the end of your cook time. That parchment paper acts as a sleeve and you can carefully lift it out. Let it cool until you can handle it. It's a really nice crust. So it's got a great crusty outside and a really tender inside. If you haven't tried soda bread, I hope you will give this a try. It's almost a no-fail recipe. It's super easy. Just look at that. Isn't it beautiful? It's a nice tender crumb. So I wanted to show you just kind of a close-up of what these slices look like. Lovely crust. And then watch how tender this is. It's nice and moist. It's a tight crumb, but it is not tough. And yes, like I said, copious amounts of salted Kerrygold butter. This is how you have to eat it. It's so good. I hope you'll give this a try. And please let me know what you think in the comments. All right, let's get back to the stew. I sometimes pile stew on my bread and eat it like that. And then sometimes I dunk the bread in the stew or tear off chunks of bread and put it in the stew. Any way you want to do it's great, but those two things pair so well together. They really do belong together. So there you have it, guys. My Irish stew with my Irish soda bread. And if you've made it this long, please let me know in the comments. Do y'all make Irish soda bread? And do you put baking powder and baking soda in yours? My mom always did, so that's how I make it. But I've seen some people make it without the egg, some people make it without the sugar, and without the baking powder. I think there's probably only 4 or 5 ingredients that you have to have in there to make it an Irish soda bread. I know a lot of people will put raisins or currants in there to do kind of a sweet version. Oh, and just to compare, can you tell a difference between the regular flour and the gluten-free? Because I can't hardly tell a difference. They are practically identical in flavor and texture. Gluten-free is on the right here. Thrive Life has the best gluten-free flour blend I have ever used. We have family members with celiac disease, so I have tried so many different gluten-free flours. Bob's Red Mill, King Arthur, our local HEB, the 1-to-1. Nothing compares to Thrive Life gluten-free flour. It's crazy. It's so good. Once you use it, you're not going to want to go back, so y'all give that a try. It's March, Be sure to check out my website. We have some really great St. Patrick's Day sales going on. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate you. Y'all be blessed. And until next time, y'all take care and keep thriving.